Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast. I'm your host, Christian Harris, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Crystal Danbury, who is the head of safety, risk and insurance for Sainsbury's. But we don't actually talk about Sainsbury's much at all, to be honest, because that's quite a new role for Crystal. But what we do get into is her really inspirational and interesting backstory. We talk about some of the key ideas and big themes around how to drive safety culture. We talk about leadership and how actually a lot of safety is just about being a good leader and how to inspire and influence people. And we get some ideas from Crystal of what inspires her and some resources that she recommends people follow and enjoy and benefit from. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. I certainly enjoyed chatting to Crystal and definitely learnt a lot from the interview. As always, if you do enjoy the podcast, please hit follow or subscribe. Please give us a comment and please spread the word on social media to get more people who are passionate about safety and risk involved in joining the audience. Let's join my conversation now with Crystal. Hope you enjoy it and see you again soon. Cheers. Crystal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Nice to get you on, and sorry it's taken a bit of a time because you've had a bit of a bad stretch of it with COVID.
Yeah, indeed. Well, yes, it's good to be on the road to recovery fully and be here.
Yes, there's I'm trying to think who it is. There's somebody, I can't think her name now. She was at Mace, I think, and she's been really ill. She's had long COVID.
Oh, really?
Well, the name will come to me, but she's been doing some vlogs and things, and yeah, she's been really struggling with it. So yeah, it's I'm glad to see that you are more or less recovered. It seems like.
Excellent. Thank you.
For those that don't know you, do you want to just give a quick bit of an intro in terms of who you are and your role and a little bit about the business? I don't think the business needs much introduction.
No, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Crystal Danbury. I'm currently the group head of safety and insurance for Sainsbury's, which needs no introduction. But yeah, really amazing organisation, 190,000 people, and touches everything from sort of the retail space to logistics, and supply chain. So, and not many people know they've actually got a global footprint. So yeah, really incredible organisation, and 4 months in.
I didn't know there was a global footprint.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got supply chain. Obviously, we're out in all sorts of countries, and when you pick up your apples or your pineapples and stuff on the shelf, they've been sourced and go for our wonderful supply chain and some of our third parties as well. And yeah, it's a really amazing organisation.
Interesting. And you look after all aspects of the group, so not just the superstores.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so group head. So we have Argos, Sainsbury's Bank. Sainsbury's as a whole has a very large, massive logistics organisation, and there's also Habitat as well. So yeah, look after all of it.
Very good. That's an interesting and a big role. So we'll perhaps touch on some of that a bit later. But I was keen to start with something which you shared recently on LinkedIn, which was kind of your origin story, and I thought it was really powerful, and obviously got a lot of traction on social media. So I'm sure lots of people shared that as well. And I just thought that'd be a great thing to delve into. Do you want to just give a bit of background in terms of why you decided to put that out there?
Yeah, it felt really, really important to me. I just sat on social media that day, and it was results day, and I saw this real outpouring from actually a lot of parents on LinkedIn, sort of just trying to lift their teenager up and say, it's not the end of the world, it's okay. And I just felt really sad at the fact that the emotion around this was so dire. And actually these amazing, amazing kids have been studying and doing A-levels and GCSEs through COVID. And somehow the pressure was still there and that judgment was still there on what that grade was. And I just sat in this chair and thought, that's just, I truly believe if you're going to be a leader in the world, you have to be vulnerable with how you got to where you got to, so people understand that grade, so from my perspective, grade does not dictate where you get to. And so I just thought, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to be really open about, I got 6 C's, 4 D's at GCSE. Nobody really understood that I was dyslexic at the time. I did everything I possibly could to get good grades, and that's where I landed. Didn't do college. I dove straight into the world of work. I really wanted to help, make sure that I was bringing money in and was sort of maintaining myself to help my family as well, because we have some fairly humble beginnings. And I just busted my butt, really. And it's ingrained in our family to really work hard. And I became a director by 34 and did all of my education stuff, secondary education, just later while I worked. So when I saw these mums and dads just like, it's okay, Becky, or it's okay, Kevin, it's going to be okay, you can go and do it all again, or you can start an apprenticeship. I just thought, yeah, you really can. You really can just get to wherever you want to through so many different paths. And the pressure academically on people is so heavy, especially when we're becoming more aware of neurodiverse people with dyslexia and Asperger's and all this sort of stuff. There is more paths into success than GCSEs and A-levels. And I just wanted to really reach out and just sort of be the example to say, get to wherever you want to get, you can.
Yeah. There are very, very few careers or vocations where you absolutely have to have certain qualifications. I mean, my wife's a lawyer, and obviously, to get into law school, you've got to have a certain level of achievement, and then you've got to actually pass your exams, or if you want to be a doctor. But there aren't that many, are there, that you are fixed by what you've achieved academically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more we say that out loud and advocate things like apprenticeships and things like that, where you learn on the job, I think the better for everybody.
I mean, so I did okay at school and I got a decent degree, and then I sort of went and did a couple of years of management consultancy. And the MD of that business, he's actually now a director and investor in my company now, because we kind of became friends and stayed in touch and whatever. And he sort of said, in his experience, you have some people who go on this kind of career path of accountancy or law or whatever, and they do this kind of slow trajectory and climb up. And then you have other people who do all these weird and wonderful and wacky things. So he went and ran a door panels business, and I've gone into the world of being on my hands and knees and scrubbing floors and doing all sorts of random stuff. But he said, you tend to find that the people that do these different paths end up in basically the same place, but have a lot more fun doing it.
Yeah. Do you know what? I could not agree with you more. And I think some of the best time that I ever had was in my first safety position. So I was basically a junior health physics technician. So I was on a nuclear site, and I worked with 22 guys, and the youngest one was probably like 37. The oldest one was like 55. And we genuinely got filthy every day. We had the crack every day. I learned so much about work ethic, grit, but also camaraderie and how you can really look after each other in a good space. And I've had the best. I think this is year 19 of safety. I've had the best time. And would I have gone back and done uni if I ever had the opportunity? I don't know, because it means I probably wouldn't have met all these amazing people. So yeah, you can definitely, you end up, I think, where you can end up anywhere, but you have a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think also you get a good appreciation for different people and what makes people tick as well. Because I think if you're sort of, lots of my friends are, as I say, lawyers and accountants and whatever, but like, have they ever done a night shift with some cleaners, or have they ever been in a workshop, or have, you know what I mean? And so I think getting exposure to different types of people is the right way of saying it, but you know what I mean, people doing different jobs at different levels. And I think you can you learn so much about how people work and what makes people tick, and therefore how you can sort of influence people and help people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the CEO of Openreach used to say at every breakout event that we used to have, sort of leadership breakout, he used to make a really big point and say, I am Clive Selly, and I do the least work here, right? And the first time I was there, I was like, oh my God, how could you say that? And he probably does more hours than anyone you could ever imagine. But what he was basically saying is work, like on the ground, getting filthy, fixing the thing for the customer, the end user, the frontline guy or woman. He doesn't touch that. And I think with that comes a real responsibility to listen so intently and to try and participate as much as possible to get real insight and real knowledge on what real work looks like. But yeah, I think the further away you can get, the more detached you can get. And actually it brings me back to my side of safety, really. When I was very young in that first safety position, it completely shaped exactly who I was ever going to be as a leader, because nobody listened to us. We were the ones climbing stacks. We were the ones wading rivers. We were the ones who were looking after guys in full air suits, decommissioning labs. We were the one clearing up spills. We were the one in BAs for hours. And they would write processes in a separate building and they would post them to us or email them. And we used to have a real big conversation about they've just not got a clue how to really do this safely. And it made my decision then at 19, I had to be a leader in this space, not just a safety manager, because you can write a process in a room if you want to. I was going to be a leader in this space to make sure that there was never a person like me again, or like all the lads, who had to climb a stack with a process behind them that they had to deviate from because it wasn't designed with the end user in mind. So yeah, I spend as much time in frontline as possible.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. And I know you've done, I don't know how many episodes you've done, but you've done a few little podcasts of your own talking about safety 1, 2 differently and delving into some of those topics, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the podcast about safety 1, 2 and differently, just I think it's this really interesting topic that we all get a bit precious about. We should adopt one of them.
Yeah, people are very sort of what's the word? I don't want to be inflammatory. Committed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually, if you're doing safety well, if you're doing anything well, the best thing you can ever do is look at all these incredible authors that have learned something, and you can just pick the bits that are relevant to you. And I think I called it a buffet in the podcast, that all of this research is done. We don't have to do it. How amazing is that? We get to pick up a book or an audio book, and we get to learn and pick up the salient points from years of research or years of work from other people.
Yeah.
Pick it up, and whatever works, adopt it. Whatever doesn't, throw it in the bin.
Yeah. What was interesting for me listening to those episodes you did was, as you were talking about each of the 3 what's the best way, movements or thought processes or whatever,
styles of safety.
Actually, when you listen to your description of them all, and I think this is one of the challenges, they all make perfect sense. So when you're explaining to them, it's like, oh yeah, everyone is sort of nodding along. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then you kind of fit it, you move on to the next. And so I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it? That people that it all does make sense, but then that supports the point that actually you should be looking at it holistically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the downsides to going into any real profession, right, is you can say, I only use this one tool. It would be like an electrician saying you've got to pick one thing in your tool chest and that's all you're allowed to do. You're a brilliant, competent person, but one tool, you can't do anything effectively. And what you end up doing is bodging stuff, because everybody knows to make a real difference, to make the connection where you need to carry on the metaphor, you need multiple tools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Going back to your sort of social media, your LinkedIn, one of my observations, and I shared this with you before we started, so it won't be a shock to you, is that actually what you're talking about most of the time is not safety. I would say it's more actually about leadership and driving change and culture and all that sort of stuff. I mean, what would you say, if that's a conscious or an unconscious thing, is driving that for you, do you think?
I think it's definitely unconscious, because I kind of feel that safety and leadership is one and the same thing. And I've always, somebody asked me a little while ago what my real aspiration was. I said, I've never really had one. I've never had a goal or career goal or anything like that. I've never really cared for that sort of pin in a map. Mine's always been, where does it feel good to be and where it wants to make a difference. And I said, if I was ever going to articulate it, it's much bigger than a company or a role. It's to make the world a better place to work. And that's because the one thing that all of us have in common, regardless of what we do, is we all have a job, whether that's a full-time mum, full-time dad, whether it's you doing what you do or me doing what I do.
Yeah.
We all work. And actually, the world is still full of places and organizations where people aren't safe aren't looked after, I would say. And I think there is something really broken about organizations that make an awful lot of money, and it's always off the back of the biggest part of that pyramid in terms of staff is the frontline user, right? They're the ones that are making your money. They're the ones that are creating your service or delivering your product or service or widget. And with that, they are the ones at most risk as well, whether it's risk of assault if they're a frontline worker or a security guard. If you take, I've worked in rail, train drivers, they witness horrendous things like suicide, and no one gets that frontline view other than that driver, and everybody is affected by work in different ways. And I think, having been a frontline worker and having really had to graft myself and feel like I wasn't cared for, I feel like it's my responsibility, because I am able to change things. And actually, it would be a detriment, I think, to anybody just to say, this is my lane, I'm going to sit right in this comfortable little divot. I can do safety with my eyes shut, right? I love it. But actually, I also have to acknowledge that my edges meet other types of leadership and other types of leader. And if I can sit at a decent level in an organisation and say, are we listening? And not just to the safety stuff, but just in general, to our people. Are we taking on board their feedback? Is there anything else we can do? Because if they're happy, the whole business is happier and more productive. So I think it's just in my nature as opposed to like a conscious effort.
Yeah, I think what you said there about, if the people are happy, they're going to perform better. I think there's something around that feeling of safety, that feeling of protection, which often gets lost between the boardroom and the shop floor. And I think that's where the leadership role around safety and risk is really important. It's actually getting that disconnect reconnected. Because if you look at it and you think about, well, if people, there's so much evidence, if people feel safer, they perform better. If they perform better, they stick with you for longer. They learn more skills, they are higher performing, they drive more profit. Who wouldn't want that? But then quite often things get caught up in the sort of financial side of claims and costs, and and it's sort of almost everybody's looking at it in the wrong way, I would say.
Yeah, I think I think if I was ever going to describe myself as, I'm a safety expert, but culture is what I live to change and challenge. And so I've lost my train of thought. What were you just saying?
Just talking about the sort of disconnect between getting, the financial side of things and the human side of things, and the fact that actually, if you get safety right, then the financial stuff comes with it anyway. But why not do it? Why not do it for the other reasons?
Absolutely. And I think one of the really interesting things to have watched in this space progress is this whole want for well-being. Everybody has a well-being champion. You have well-being first aiders, all that sort of stuff. And I think what people forget about safety is it's the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. If what you want is highly productive, people that are overly, creative and free thinking, you need a happy, healthy, progressive organization. You can't do that if half your organization is coming to work and wincing when they do their day job. And I remember doing a presentation on well-being framework. I said, we should just stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Take Maslow's hierarchy, have it as an empty triangle, and challenge yourself on your organisation at every level. Do look after people's health and safety. Can they pay their bills? That is, are you paying people fairly?
Yeah.
Right? Go up that. You want everybody at that top little bubble, that's that transcendence piece, which is helping everybody else and mentoring. That's where you want your organisation to go. There is a whole triangle of activity comes first. And so that's the bit I think is really amazing, is I think well-being is the progression of health and safety. And I say this everywhere, health, physical and mental, and safety, physical and mental, equals well-being. That's it. Health and safety is the sort of cornerstone of well-being. Well-being is just the evolution.
Yeah.
And that is when you really focus on that triangle, that's where you get your amazing people.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met somebody that's like the most creative person ever in the whole entire world. And you say, you know, how will you do it? And I say, oh, it's, you know, terrible. All my bottom of Maslow's hierarchy is missing, but I'm doing great work.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want the best out of people, you have to treat them well.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about the world of entrepreneurship as well. And I sort of have quite a big network of people that have their own businesses, and actually to get in that kind of flow state where you feel as if you're doing your best work and you're really productive and you're moving things forward. It's almost impossible to get to that point, even in your own business, where there are many fewer people, without having, you know, that sort of those foundations, I suppose, of feeling like, yeah, you're secure, you know, whether that's financially or whatever. But yeah, it's very true. You know, we've got to get these basics in place if we want to achieve these good outcomes. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's what I do advocate. I think it's very rare that I have a standalone safety conversation. I can do, obviously, and I get sort of consulted on the expertise. Can we do X and Y, or what's the best way to do something? Yeah. But the majority of the leadership level conversations that I have are about holistic culture and how we change a culture. And it's all sort of wrapped up in that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And you before we started, you said there were three kind of key things that you thought were, you know, 3 steps or 3 ideas or philosophies that were important in that. Would you want to share your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so just sort of scribble them down, and I always say them fairly separately. And I started to say on LinkedIn the other day, actually, culture change is a journey and you have to really be open to it. And what I would say to any organisation is like, where do I really start? There are sort of 3 layers of activity. One of them, the first one, has to be listening, like, and really listening, not defending, not feeding back as a result of something that you've heard, genuinely taking it in, saying thank you for the feedback. And then number 2, even more importantly, sitting with that feedback, really having a good look inwards and thinking, where does that resonate? And if you're seeing something that doesn't resonate with what you think your leadership style is or what your organization is, then you've missed something, because it doesn't come from nowhere. Feedback is so valuable and you have to use it like it's research. So listen, sit with that feedback. And then as a result of that feedback, act with intent. I can't tell you the amount of organizations that I have seen that have done a safety culture survey or a culture survey of some sort. They put out a bit of a defensive stance on some of the stuff. Like this is all, but this is because, and then they put out an action plan that will just gather dust. There is not a single better way to show your organization that you're not there for them than not acting. And there's loads of stuff underneath that. If you take those 3 tiers, what's the conduit to get that message back to you to listen to? Don't just send everything out on email by survey. You need to really sit in a room, probably with people that don't work in your organization, to get real feedback. And then sitting with it, again, somebody independently telling you what they've heard. It's really easy between you and somebody that's your peer to sort of explain away feedback, but get told it quite coldly, sit with it, digest it, and then think, right, how do we get from where we thought we were to where we want to be, and create a proper action plan and act with intent and let people know what you're doing so that they can see your commitment to making it better. And that's the starting point. That's the first half turn of a wheel. You consistently do that along the way, people will come with you, people will trust you, people will be more open with their feedback. And there in itself, you've started to change culture.
And obviously, you're in your current role. You've only been here for a few months, so it's so you can't really start talking about what you've done. I don't imagine on that yet. But how have you sort of gone through that journey in a previous role, for example, and sort of maybe some of the kind of practical stuff around what's the best way that you found to actually go through those steps? How to elicit the feedback to start with, for example.
Yeah. So it's really nice actually, because I've done it very particularly rolled out safety culture surveys in rail. I also did a really big safety culture piece of work at Openreach. And I can kind of tell you the bits that work and the bits that don't. So in rail, they tend to use a standard tool that is by the sort of health and safety lab or something like that. And it's all survey based. Now, survey is good. And it's really good for those people that don't feel confident in speaking out. You need to make it anonymous. And everyone gets really bothered by that, but you really do. If you're creating a safe space, you have to start with a genuinely safe space. And the feedback has to be more important than the person saying it, because if they don't feel safe, that's a reality you need to deal with and you need to fix. Yeah. You get so much from that. You can do a bit of a plan. It's a bit of a dry way to do it, but you can get gains from it. The biggest piece of culture work I ever did was Openreach. And I actually got told as I left by my boss, John, that in 40 years, they'd never seen culture change. And they were like, how you've been here for only several years and you've started to turn that wheel is insane. But it's by doing exactly those 3 steps. The first thing that I did was really go out to market and make safety culture organisations interview for the job. So they're going to come in, they're going to collect that feedback. Why? What's your intent? What's your style? And I wanted face-to-face stuff. Yeah. And I landed on an organisation called Tribe, who actually do half survey, half working groups, travel the whole country. And I thought that's a good mix, right? Yeah. They gathered all that feedback and they did exactly that, build it right into a big plan, loads of really good feedback in a report, quite hard-hitting stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we really sat with that for a long time. We talked about it in our leadership group, but I also at the same time was going out every 2 weeks and spending days with different types of engineer. So as this feedback came up, I'm not defending the feedback or explaining it away because I think, heard that. I've seen this in practice. You have to be able to join the reality to the paper. So if you are behind a safety culture piece of work, getting out in the field with the end user is also so important. And essentially brought all those engineers together. We realised what we were really missing was some core promises, actually, to the organisation and to the people about how we were going to do work in future and how we were going to create a better space for them. That wasn't for me to create. It certainly wasn't for Tribe to create. So what I said to Tribe was, we need to get all of the people. We need to get literally different types of engineer, different types of manager, directors, everybody in a room. This really got to reflect the whole of Openreach. It has to be created by the whole of Openreach or a subset of. And essentially, in user groups, we all work together to bring together their valued behaviours, and it was amazing, really amazing. I think the rollout is then very difficult about how, what do you do? Do you do posters? Do you do road shows? And it was really building up some serious. So I left just as all of that was landing. Right. But the feedback in spending every other day, as we were moving towards this and doing the safety culture surveys, spending every other day with members of the field and utilising internal social media. I did on one day, on National Safety Day, I was like, right, we're going to have a hashtag today, which is 1x1 safety, inspired by Simon Sinek. Mm-hmm. What do you do today? You already do so much on safety. It's not for me to tell you how to keep yourself safe. You tell me how you're awesome. And there's 5,000 posts in a single day by engineers that made videos and were telling me, the rest of the organisation, what they did to keep themselves safe. That again is really important, because don't assume that everybody doesn't know what they're doing. Assume that they do, but sometimes they just need more support. Yeah. And the conversation around safety changed. It really did. The challenges came thick and fast, as they do with a massive organisation. But when you change the topic from safety as a compliance tool, as a compliance word, to care, if we make this change, I don't want to talk to you about the legislation. I want to talk to you about whether your engineer is safe. Are they getting home? When you change and put care in the centre of safety, you can't have the sort of conversations that you might want to have as a sort of a fairly clinical organisation. You're forced to have human ones, and that again changes everything. And I absolutely love it. Essentially, I find that's my job. Is I want to put people at the heart of business, but in a valued way.
I think I've spoken before on the podcast about the dangers of the word compliance, because it's sort of it boils everything down to something that's measurable, but also sort of like a bare minimum approach. And actually, that's not what it's about. It's about, as you say, the human side of things and getting people inspired. And that's I think that's the biggest thing that people in safety and risk need to cotton onto, and not cotton onto, but they need to really be pushing, is how to inspire people around this, because everybody knows, there's claims and there's costs and there's injuries, but that's kind of a bit of a negative way of thinking. But, let's think about the positive side of this. What can we achieve together if we get this right? And so the kind of work that you've described there, seems fantastically aligned to that. So is that the plan then, to do something similar in Sainsbury's?
Absolutely. So I think my number one objective always with any organisation is to spend time, and actually Sainsbury's are incredible. 9-week induction, all of it frontline. I baked bread, worked in bakeries, did night shifts, picked and packed, loaded vans, did all of that. And that was because I think this is probably the first time I've ever worked with an organisation where they think it's just as important for me to understand frontline as I think it's important to understand frontline. And usually you end up fighting to get that time and to give that time, but it was absolutely part of their onboarding. Get to know the organisation because it's special. And so the next part will be finding out what the real impact is, finding out how we all feel about safety, and just already the feedback I'm getting is really changing conversation around risk and safety, and putting people in the heart even more than they were. I think Sainsbury's maintained the safest grocer, I think, through the whole of COVID, just because they were so adamant they were going to go above and beyond for people. And it's really amazing to be joining at a time that they are just so people-centric. So it really aligns with me. It's probably what lured me away from Openreach, if I'm honest, because just their values very much aligned to mine.
Because it sounds like you were at a point at Openreach where actually the next 6 months would have been so rewarding to stay. So it must have been a big wrench to leave in many ways.
It was I definitely cried, but it's been one of the values here is be human, and I've never really seen a value like this driven from all the way up and down, and everybody's really talking about that. And I think all the work that I do around humanising work, it just spoke to it. And I can see that this is, I'm going to be here for a very, very long time, just living that value, really. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, I'm conscious of time, but before we wrap up, are there any particular resources or people that you kind of draw inspiration from, that you like to share for the audience? Anything you could recommend, whether it's a book or a podcast or a speaker or anything like that?
Absolutely. Several, actually. So if you don't mind swearing,
no, we don't mind that.
I've been very good today. But look up Gary Vee, and he breaks down work and success and career pathways, and really just nails things to the wall. He's fantastic. So Gary Vee, look him up. Simon Sinek is a very typical one that everybody talks about, but his book, The Infinite Game, is exactly where I have always driven from, and didn't actually know until I was given the language through that book what I do. Infinite Game by Simon Sinek is amazing, and I've read that a couple of times now, especially around the organizations that you think should have made it through all the hard times and they failed because of their finite thinking. I actually am part of a group that I find really inspiring. So I'm part of Project Millennium, and they have community calls, and basically everybody gets together and really mulls and pulls apart problems. And they have a philosophy call where they really dig into these big questions about culture, and it's really down and dirty. Everybody disagrees and agrees all in one, and I find that really brilliant. And there's not many.
If anybody hasn't heard the episode, I've had Colin and James on individually, but I had them on together just when that was launching, and we did a bit of an overview of all the ideas, what the concept was and stuff. So recommend people listening to that. Yeah,
definitely. And then I think probably my biggest inspiration ever would be wherever I am, Frontline will be your massive inspiration if you're open to really listening. So above and beyond any book, no one can ever tell you what's wrong or what's right other than the people executing your work. So if you only have one thing, you have a little bit of time, go and spend it Frontline.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, I'm a much smaller business, but I make sure to spend time going out, and I don't do that many full night shifts, but I go and join the guys that are starting at 10 and spend a couple of hours and just see what's going on, because you've got to get your hands a bit dirty and figure out what's going on. Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Before we wrap up then, any plugs, like your website or connect on LinkedIn? How can people contact you and get in touch and follow you if they're inspired by what we've talked about today?
Lovely. I mean, the easiest way is probably LinkedIn. So just find me on there, and then feel free to just drop me a message.
Great stuff. Well, thanks very much, Crystal. Really enjoyed it. And we'll see how you get on going through that fantastic journey ahead at Sainsbury's, and perhaps check in the future and see how it's going.
Definitely. We've just definitely inspired me to get on with my podcasting again, because I haven't posted one in about 6 weeks. So I will get on that, actually. It's definitely revved me up. So thank you.
Prolific beats perfect. And one guy that inspires me is a guy called Daniel Priestley, and he's all about sort of influencing people. And one of his sort of maxims is prolific beats perfect. So in terms of getting stuff out there into the world, don't stew on it and make it perfect. Just get it out and move on to the next one, and just keep putting stuff out, because it's the 1,000 cuts that make the difference, not the single sort of the single stab, as it were.
I love that. That's excellent. Thank you. That's really good advice.
No worries. I'll send you a link to some of his stuff as well.
Lovely. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll see you next week with I can't tell you who it will be, but it'll be another great interview. Promise.
Thanks, Christian.